Yulia heard footsteps and squeezed her eyes shut. She recognized them immediately. "It's me, your hateful stepmother." For 6 months now, her stepmother had been both her father and her mother, and if Agnes's had been a very good woman before, now she was not going to hide her real identity. As soon as Yulia was brought home from the hospital, Agnes's immediately told her, "I really hope you won't be long in this world. It would have been better for everyone if you had died, but you managed to hurt me here too. So before adulthood, you died, Julia." Then it seemed that all the words of the stepmother she imagined simply could not be. Apparently, medication, several heavy operations, and a terrible sense of guilt gave about itself. But very soon, Julia realized that the chase was not a joke of the girl, and it really interfered. Now Julia understood that the stepmother would not stop at anything. Too much money stood on the channel a few years ago. Julia was a happy person a month ago. She studied at the university and adored her beloved father. Absolutely nothing is needed. Despite her father's huge fortune, she was never an upstart and never learned to sing. Her friends liked her, and she was her dad's joy and pride. Julia's mom didn't remember Julia. Of course, she needed a woman's affection, but she was so used to her dad replacing everyone. When her dad turned 45, he brought Agnesa to the house, introduced them, and said that they were dating. Basically, Julia, who was already 20, understood that her dad had done a real feat not to get married all this time. So she met Agnesa and got married. So Agnesa met an affectionate woman, which she did not like at first. The girl did not even understand why she was beautiful, well-groomed, and polite. And then she realized that it was her eyes. They were not so lifeless, cold, and empty. The most interesting thing, her eyes never changed, whether she was looking at her father, at Julia, at the table, or at the wall. But when expensive things, especially jewelry, came into the agonist's field of vision, her eyes chewed Julia's, while Agnes observed unspoken neutrality, trying not to cross paths and behave properly. Dad saw that his girls didn't fight or only then proposed to Agnes the day it all happened. July was running home on all sails with her new license clutched in her hand. Dad offered to buy it, but the girl resisted. "Dad, why pay for everything? Am I so stupid that I can't pass the exams on my own?" She passed the first time, and now she was running home not only to please her father but also to drive her own car. A month ago, her father gave her a beautiful red car, and I passed Dad went out to the car. His face was upset, even angry, and a furious Agnes swept past him. "Dad, something's happened to my daughter." "It's all right, it's the cost of married life." Could he tell his daughter that his wife had demanded that he sign over half the company to her to be sure of the future? He did not want to overshadow Yulia's joy when you drove past the pop. "Oh, Daddy, you have to go, and let's go." They drove out of town. Yulia looked at her father, but as a daughter, he seemed to do everything well. And then from around the corner, a lorry jumped out at them. Yulia pressed the brake pedal, but it just failed. The speed did not slow down. Daddy understood everything. He grabbed the steering wheel, twisted it, and put his side of the car under the lorry. The door opened. "Well, you're not dead yet. What do you need, Agnes, or don't you know? I need you to leave this world before you'll be 21, and you won't be able to inherit. I will inherit, and you won't get in the way." Agnes smiled. July was very wary, and there was something sinister in her smile. "And you know, darling, and I thought of something like that. And you're sick, or rather, it's a bloody log. You're an invalid, and it's very hard for you to be in the city. You're moving to a country house. By the way, I sacked your nurse today and found you another new nurse who will look after you the way you deserve to be looked after. I wonder if this was an order from the underworld. Yuri was desperate to find us and made it up again. You're almost there, darling." She pulled out a piece of paper and started writing a novel. Sergei Viktorovich was convicted 7 years ago as a murderer, and in the zone, he behaved very aggressively. He had a lot of broken noses and broken bones to his credit. Agnes almost danced with joy, while he had nowhere to live, nothing to drink, and had not seen a woman for so long. "I congratulate you, my dear. Very soon you will meet your daddy. In the meantime, you need to pack all the things you need." Agnes danced and left the room. After several hours during which Julia stared blankly at the ceiling, they never came for her. She loved their country house, and now, realizing that this was probably the last stage of her life, Yulia wanted to cry. Agnes paid the people who had helped to bring Yulia here and looked around with satisfaction. It was nice here, the birds were singing, the air was fresh, and the most important thing was that there was nobody around. If you wanted to shout or cry, nobody would hear you anyway. Agnes sent a kiss and left the room. July heard her talking to a man and realized that the new shirt had arrived. Serge couldn't believe his luck. He had been released only a week ago and he hadn't even bothered to contact anyone he knew. He knew that after all that had happened, no one would want to talk to him, and being listened to was out of the question. He had nowhere else to go, so he tried to get a job as a cleaner and was almost hired. But then some woman recognized him and shouted so much that he was literally pushed out. But what did he want? He was squatting against the wall of the shop when a luxury car drove past him, stopped a little further away, and then a beautiful woman of about 35 came out of it in reverse. Sergei stood up, and she looked at him with interest, and there was a lot to look at. He was about 2 meters tall, had broad shoulders, a 2-week-old, almost bald head, and clothes that had long gone out of fashion. Why he is in prison, and you, unlike the money you will earn. I really wanted to eat, just brutally, and he said murder. The woman smiled and handed him a large note. Here, go eat. In an hour, I will come here and wait for me here. Work you need very well. When Sergei heard what work he was offered, I will write, but you do not know me. I just got out of prison, and this is what I need. Of course, he agreed. Who would refuse to work with housing in his situation? When the woman left, Sergei looked around the beautiful place. He certainly understood that a country house is not a house. It's a country house on 6 hectares. But to see that this family has a lot of money, not just a lot of money, but a lot of money. But why is he here? Sergei opened the door to the room and immediately came across a prickly but frightened look in the eyes of the girl. Hello, my name is Sergei. His name. He came closer to the bed on which lay Yulia, the girl with pity, but it was all this scary man. She squeezed her eyes shut, but nothing happened. Her eyes had to open. The man stood in front of the bed and crossed his arms on his chest. You always lie, July. She faintly nodded, and she shrugged her shoulders uncertainly. In the hospital they said you can, but her stepmother said to lie down. She couldn't sit up, and there was no one to help her. The nurse was afraid of cameras everywhere. It's clear that nothing is clear. You want to eat. Yulia looked at him surprised and didn't understand anything. In her head, why he is aggressive and in jail for murder should have attacked her long ago. Though she probably die better on a full stomach, especially since today no one fed her. The girl again raised her eyes to the man and nodded. Punctuation marks, inverted commas. He looked around, saw the TV remote control, and handed it to Yulia so she wouldn't get bored. The man left, and the girl looked at him dumbfounded. It seemed to her that he was smiling, or maybe he was a maniac and he needed to tame his victim first. Sergei appeared about 20 minutes later. She had barely had time to be distracted by the TV series and had already forgotten why she had been brought here. When he entered the room, she flinched as the man pushed a table in front of her on wheels under the bedpans. She looked at the food: fried eggs, salad of fresh vegetables, bread in big slices, and cut-up smoked meat. Nothing healthy, but everything smelled so good. He stopped and looked at her, bent over, and held out his hands to her. July squealed, and Sergei recoiled. You're not hurt? No. What do you need? Sit down. I wanted to, or is it lying down? You will eat. Yulia blushed. He bent down again and sat her on both sides under a feast of cushions. How nice for her to look at everything from a normal angle. And only then we will talk. After a hearty dinner, he brought himself coffee and tea, pulled up a chair, and turned down the TV. But I'll tell you what you did wrong. And the girl, without realizing why, told him everything about her father and the car and the accident, and the fact that she would never get up again. He listened and didn't interrupt. In the end, he just asked her if she thought, I was going to kill you. Something like that. Very interesting. Come on, let's go to bed tonight. We'll talk tomorrow. Tell me, is this your house? Yes, but there's no medical history here. I don't know if it's in my father's office on the ground floor. Have a look. By the way, there's some of Dad's stuff in there if you need to change. In the morning, Yulia was woken up by the smell of coffee. She opened her eyes and realized she hadn't woken up once during the night. Can I have some? I've counted everything here. You can have some. Sergei slammed a thick folder on the table and rustled it up. Then he silently returned, took her in his arms, and carried her to the bathroom. Yulia was madly ashamed, but there was no escaping naturalness. Then they drank coffee and talked. "But you don't look much like a killer." "But I'm definitely not a killer." Yulia looked at him in surprise. "I'm a surgeon. I love my job and always took on the most difficult cases. It so happened that I ended up in a private clinic, or rather, my boss was a man for whom money was more important than anything else in the world. He bought a batch of substandard drugs. I immediately realized that it was better not to use it after surgery. People are already weakened, and the body has to fight it. I thought that if they kicked me out, they would kill everyone with this stuff, so I agreed, but I bought the drugs with my own money and switched one day. I disappeared and gave all the patients a shot, and in the morning 6 people died, and I had a pocket full of checks and only for this medicine." Yulia listened breathlessly. "So it turns out that life turned back not only for her. And in which hospital you worked and in which hospital you were treated, and I don't really understand why you don't walk, but I'll sort it out if you let me. Tonight, Sergey, you didn't eat outside." He sat her in a chair and started grilling kebabs for the last time in Yulia's life. There was not even a thousandth of such positivity. For 2 days Sergey studied the girl's medical history. She looked at her with red eyes and asked, "Can you trust me?" July smiled. "Of course, what choice do I have anyway? Stepmother won't give me life." She didn't think it would be so painful and scary, but Yulia obediently did everything Sergey told her. When the stepmother called for the first time, the girl could already sit up and even stand up on her own, but she couldn't walk. She still could not do it on her own, but she was inspired by the success and she knew that now there was no stopping. Stepmother, learning that Yulia was still fine, tried not to show her displeasure, but Sergey said, "Is there no one who could listen to you and help? I'm sure that your car brakes are missing for a reason. There is one person only stepmother will never let us meet." She almost convinced him that she was a saint, and I was almost incapacitated after the accident. He came once before. She was in a convoy of some crap. I started to spit. The next day Sergey went to town. Yulia tried to walk quietly, and when no one was around, she almost succeeded. In the evening, a car stopped under her window. It could have been anyone, even July's stepmother. Julia pulled the blanket up to her chin and was very frightened. The next minute she heard voices. It was Sergey and Artem Nikandrovich. Yulia lifted herself up and then stood up. A friend of her father's executor entered the room. He turned round and froze. "Yulia, I don't understand anything. Agnesa said that you hadn't been up for a long time and you were dying. Young people, what was going on?" They talked for a few hours, and then Artem Nikandrovich started to pack up and leave the house. "Wait for me. I'll come and I hope I'll come tomorrow." The evening was sad. Yulia understood perfectly well that she wouldn't see Sergey again. She was afraid to admit to herself that now she couldn't breathe without this man. At night she got up quietly and went, leaning against the wall, to his room. He was awake as if waiting only for her. He asked if you'd be sorry. Artem Nikandrovich came to pick Yulia up in the morning. They had tea, and he told her how Agnesa had behaved when they came to pick her up. She was hardly told that the car had been sent for examination and the doctor who had treated Yulia had been taken into custody. She was quite confused before she left for the city, and Yulia took Sergey's hand. "I promise you'll wait for me. Do you hear? I need to talk to you about Sergey." Sergey lay down on the sofa. He honestly didn't understand what he should do to wait for Yulia, but it had been a week. She had probably forgotten about him and left. What if she came, and he had nowhere to go? He switched on the TV. Everything would be fine. But the news was so boring, and Sergey wanted to switch. But then he saw his picture on the screen. He jumped up and turned up the sound. As it turned out, Sergey Viktorovich Romanov became a victim in the insidious machinations of the head doctor. He spent several years behind bars. A few years. Who will be responsible for this? It is tentatively decided that the management of the private clinic will pay him compensation for all the years he spent behind bars. A very impressive amount of money also. Sergey Romanovich will be reinstated after certification. He sat on the couch. This simply cannot be. If it was Julie, she'd be the only one who could take it all. "So knock, you're hosting." He jerked open the door, and there was his Julie, holding a cake and a bottle of champagne. I missed her so much. He rushed over to her, held her against him, and sighed, "This is happiness." And let anyone try to say that 13 years is a big age difference. And if you like this story, please support me with a thumbs up button and learn about new interesting stories when you subscribe. Click on the bell. All the best to you.